Welcome to Connections, a podcast from the Graymere Church of Christ in Columbia, Tennessee. Our goal is to have discussions and messages that encourage us and strengthen our faith. We appreciate you joining us. Let's keep learning and growing together. Thank you for joining us in Connections. We really do appreciate everybody who's downloading and sharing this. We just want to have some conversations that'll be encouraging spiritually and maybe prompt some questions or help us think more deeply about our faith. And so that's our goal here. We're recording this the week before our VBS, and so this won't come out until afterward, but we've got a lot happening here in the church building, and we've got some of our teams getting ready later to go and hand out some flyers and just to have all the excitement that comes with the pre-VBS time. And we're coming right off week one of Great Christian Camp. And so I'm thankful that Jon David is with us always, but especially in the middle of the church camp and then the week between that and VBS. There's a lot going on. So appreciate JD joining us. And our theme for several of the next episodes is going to shift a little bit because we've been going with the quarters of our Bible classes, our adult Bible classes. And so we were focused on thinking about our faith, how to cultivate a growing faith. And this next quarter is going to be focusing on our passion and worship. And so a lot of our conversations, not all of them, but a lot of them will have to do with that idea of how we can grow in our worship and how we can develop habits that are positive for us and helpful. And so I asked JD to join us because he, in Sunday mornings, leads our worship most often. We have several that are capable and able to do that, but JD is the one who does a lot of our worship planning. And so I wanted to sit down with him and just ask him to share a little bit about that process, about the process that he and I go through when we're planning a worship service together. And hopefully that'll be not only interesting to you, but also maybe can spark some thoughts about how we can all prepare ourselves for worship, whether we have a leadership role or not. And so I'll just get the ball rolling a little bit, and this could go in a number of different directions. But when you're thinking about getting ready to lead singing, to lead worship on a Sunday, what's kind of the process that you use to prepare that? And what are some of the things that you think through that would be helpful for us to know about?
Yeah. Well, let me just start by saying, I enjoy being able to do that and be a part of the worship process. So just to, I guess, give some people behind the curtain scene, the first thing I do, and Andrew will attest to this, that I'll walk into his office at some point on a Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday and say, "Hey man, what are you preaching on Sunday?" And, at that point, we'll sit and talk about, direction, or, we'll talk about, potential songs, but it just puts in my mind, some of the things that we're going to be focusing on. And that's kind of been one of the things that I've always, I guess, just always done as a song leader. I know there's different opinions on it, and some people like more of just a variety of songs and types of songs and that sort of thing. But for me, I enjoy more of an intentional focal point, if that makes sense. And so, once I know what we're going to be doing, as far as the message, that doesn't mean there's not other categories of singing, but at least at some point, preparing our minds for the message, I'll start thinking towards that, and trying to pick out songs that might help us start thinking in that direction. And then, invitation song and maybe the closing song, I'll try to refocus back on that. And so that's kind of the upfront conversations that we'll have, I would say. And, it just gives me something to kind of shoot for, kind of a goal to achieve as well. And it not just be, always spontaneous or always the same old songs. I think, one of the things that I started trying to do early on was not sing the same songs every Sunday. And so that helps, kind of challenges me to look into the lyrics of songs a little bit more, and to think through, okay, we haven't used this song in a long time. Let me plug it in. It fits with this, or, oh man, we just led that song a month ago, and let me try to find a different one instead of, I mean, you could sing Faith is a Victory every time you talk about faith, or you can be challenged to look for different songs. So that's a little bit of my mindset. I don't know if that helps.
No, that helps a lot. And one thing I've noticed, it's helpful having those conversations, and it's nice that we're just down the hall from each other.
Yeah.
You know, we can do that. But I've also found myself several times, either in worship or sometimes even during the sermon, thinking about, well, there's one verse, and it might not even be in the chorus but it's just a verse of something we sang that just resonates exactly with part of the sermon.
Yeah.
You know? And so there's something helpful about having that all kind of woven together. So there's a similar train of thought all the way through. I'm guessing you mentioned trying to keep track. What's the best way you found to try to keep track of?
Man, honestly, technology is just so advanced these days that if I plug in a phrase or a keyword, like on my search in my computer, it will pull up every song in those folders that I have laid out that might have that word or that phrase. But then it'll also tell me, if it's a specific song, it'll give me the date of the last time I opened it, or the last time I used it. And sometimes I'll have to look back and say, okay, did I actually use it, or did I just open it kind of looking? But still, it's pretty helpful as far as a kind of a running tab of the last times that I sang that song. So, I mean, that's a credit to technology, the way we have it these days.
But that does, because I can think of pretty easily, if someone were to say, hey, we need you to stand up and lead 6 songs, I've got my 6 favorite songs that I think of, but to have a system like that where you make sure, all right, I'm not just leaning on my favorite songs, because chances are my favorite song is someone out there's least favorite.
Right. Right.
And vice versa. Like my least favorite song, that's one reason I've stopped even saying what songs I like or don't like in public, because everybody's going to have favorite songs.
Sure.
But if there's one you don't like, I mean, just as sure as you say it out loud, that's like someone's favorite meeting.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And so you always try to be aware of that.
Yeah.
When you're keeping that mix, what have you found to be helpful for like maintaining a balance of the types of songs? I mean, maybe types in the terms of new and old songs, maybe types in the terms of fast and slow, or what are some things you found helpful with that?
Man, I was just sitting there thinking about preparation for this. I mean, we know the passage, Ephesians 5:19, or 5:18 and 19 and 20. Don't be filled up on wine, but leads to wild living. Instead, be filled with the Spirit. Then it talks about singing the psalms, hymns, and spiritual songs, and singing and making melody or music in your hearts to the Lord. One of the things that I always try to keep in mind is that as the song leader, and I don't intend to take too much credit for this or anything, but there is a level at which the song leader kind of sets the tone for worship. And one of the things that I always try to think about is, okay, how can I bring energy into the assembly, or help bring energy based on the songs that we sing, and so, there are moments when a spirit-filled song is a song right before the Lord's Supper, and it is more somber and more reverent. But then there's other times when, if every song you sang was slow and, real somber, then, that can set a very, very slow, somber, tone for the worship as a whole. And so part of what I try to do is think through, okay, when are different types of songs good at different places? So like we start worship and you've just welcomed us and everybody's excited. We've been talking to each other and greeting each other. Man, I want those songs to be upbeat. Let's jump in and let's really get excited. And by the way, let me just say, because people pick on me about this all the time, but like, why do we stand so much? Man, there's just always more energy, and the singing is always better when you're standing up. So, I want people to know that that's not always demanded or anything, but it really makes a difference. But in that, trying to keep the energy up, as far as that goes. And, if we understand what worship is, it ought to be an outpouring of energy in praise to God, and making sure that we are overflowing with our thanksgiving and glory to Him. So I guess then the follow up to that is, um, you know, my other thought is in worship has to be for everybody who's in the auditorium. And so, like you said, some people have a favorite song on this side of the spectrum, and somebody has a favorite song over here. Somebody's favorite song might be fast. Another person's favorite song might be slow. Some people's favorite songs are going to be the ones that we've been singing for centuries in the church, and some are going to be the ones that are brand new songs. And so one of the things I try to think about is, how can I lead songs, a variety of songs that literally will relate to every single person in the audience? And kind of I guess my go-to numbers would be 70, 30, 60, 40. 70%, 60% older hymns or traditional hymns, 30 to 40% newer, or what we might call devotional songs that teens wouldn't sing, that sort of thing. But I'll also say that, if we've been singing a devotional song for 40 years now, it's time to start counting that as one of the older songs as well, So there's just different ways that I try to, bring in the options and the different styles.
Well, I'm like that too. There's some songs we'll sing, and in my mind, I would categorize them as, oh, these are devotional songs. But then I realized they were devotional songs when I was a teenager.
Right.
That's been long enough now. These are just songs. They just fall in the category, that our kids wouldn't see that distinction.
Right.
Because they've just grown up with both kinds of them. So, that is, I think, helpful for us to realize. And it's just a good reminder, too, that we know this is true, but just anytime we can get a reminder that worship is not all about me and what my preferences might be.
Yeah.
I think that's helpful, and to realize, hey, when we sing a song, and this would go for groups that like the newer or the older.
Yeah.
When we sing a song from that other category, hey, this is number one, we can worship doing this, whether it's your favorite tune or not. But also that might speak to the heart of people in a way that might not make a lot of sense to you, but somewhere in the auditorium, someone's really being encouraged by that particular song, just like you were by another one.
Absolutely.
And so I do think that's helpful, and it's just hard. Obviously, it's hard to sometimes find songs that everybody knows, and it's hard for us sometimes to find a way to teach new songs, outside of a worship time or something. Sometimes you just have to throw it out there, and we're going to learn it. So that's helpful as well. I was thinking about this moment that happened when we were participating in Memphis Work Camp when I was in high school. We used to go, all these groups would get together, and you'd split up into these different groups and go paint homes. And one of the houses that we went and painted one year, they had a group of kids, probably about 5 or 6 kids, who had their own like chorus. And so they were very serious about it. They were good singers, and they might have been 3rd or 4th grade or somewhere around that age group. And so they came up to us on our lunch break and said, we'd like to sing for you, and so of course that was great. And they sang for us, and then we would sing some devotional songs together at our lunch devo. And what I remember is one of the little boys was sitting next to me, and I was a teenager. So I was right in that zone of like voices changing and not super comfortable with it. So I guess I was singing pretty soft. And after one song, the little kid who I just met, he looked at me and said, "Why don't you sing like a man?" And I was like, whoa, it just kind of caught me off guard. But looking back on it, I think what he was noticing is
hey, you're really kind of just half-heartedly singing, like what? And I think about
That's
that a lot.
funny.
I think about that in worship, and sometimes it's hard for us to remember to sing out, or even to remember to like have the kinds of expression on our face that reflects how we feel.
Yeah.
Like if we're happy to be here, to look like that. So what kind of advice would you give? What would you want us to remember if we're thinking about really singing out and really
Oh
engaging
man.
in worship? Like, what are some principles to keep in mind?
Well, I go back to Ephesians 5 and then Colossians 3. I guess I would start by answering that question with a question. What does it mean to be filled with the Spirit? Um, and you know, in my mind, and what I understand about the Spirit filling us up is it's not just something that we just have, but it's something we learn to, I think, relate to. I think that's God's way of being intimately related to us, which means He is both, um, I think, in tune with our emotions, and also, our emotions come from God, right? So I think the first thing I would say is, well, what does it look like to be filled with the Spirit and understand who it is that we're worshiping? Um, I'm afraid sometimes we get so overly concerned and trying to make sure that we are worshiping the way God wants us to, as far as the boundary aspect, that we forget about the emotional aspect. And one of the things that you notice Old Testament through New Testament is when you see people worshiping, there is a physical um, there's a physical posture or a change in their countenance and the way that they present themselves. And I'm not saying we have to start going through all those postures or whatever, but um, I can't imagine the Ethiopian eunuch going on his way rejoicing and that looking like he's just walked out of a funeral, just, well, I'm glad God saved me today. I mean, there would have to be a joy and a presence that is like, man, just so enthralled with what God has just done in his life. I can't imagine David writing Psalm 51 and just kind of being nonchalant about it and the sin that he had just committed with Bathsheba. There was a brokenness and a contriteness that David is presenting before God. And I think to be filled with the Spirit means that um, maybe we need to start paying a little more attention to the emotions. And I mean, in what I understand about music, it is one of the most um, emotional provoking things that we have in this world is music. You listen to certain songs and they get you. I mean, football players put on music in the locker room to get hyped up before a game.
Absolutely.
There are certain types of songs that you have playing at a funeral because you understand it's a reverent and momentous type of occasion. Whatever it is, we all know that music is an emotional or demands emotional response. I want to make sure that we do that in our worship, you know?
Yeah.
And so then I guess the second part of that is, and be willing to smile when you're singing, you know? I'll challenge that my teenagers every once in a while. I'll be like, hey, let's smile tonight. We're fixing to sing these 3 songs about the joy of the Lord. And I want to challenge you to, while you're singing, make yourself smile and think about what it means to have the joy of the Lord. And man, it is an amplified difference in singing before and after that type of a challenge. I think that could really help us in our worship more, as the church and wherever we are. But just understanding what it is to be filled with the Spirit and the overflowing aspect of the Spirit in our lives.
And when you say amplified difference, I mean, among other things, you're just even talking about volume.
Oh,
Like louder.
volume and posture, I think well, I'll be super honest for a minute. Um, there are moments when you see people, and I'm not judging anybody's hearts, but I'm always amazed at moments where we might be singing about, joy of God and eternal salvation. And you'll just see somebody just kind of sitting here like this, and kind of like that third grader challenge you. I want you to sing like a man. Well, eyes are downcast and the face is long and the mouth is barely moving. And it's like, are you really in it? Are you paying attention? Again, I don't want to judge anybody's heart. But we do talk a lot about fruit bearing. There are certain things you see, and I would at least want us to be challenged.
Yeah.
That if emotion is not pouring out in our worship, then maybe we're not paying attention the way that we ought to. I know this, that we normally have no problem trying to figure out if somebody's invested in a ball game or not.
Yeah.
You can tell by the emotion that's pouring out, whether they're disappointed by a play or a bad call from an ump, or whether or not the team just scored a touchdown or it was the greatest play of all time. You can tell. Maybe we ought to be that way in worship a little bit more, because, standing before the throne of God is way more important than standing in the bleachers of a stadium,
And even that example is so helpful, because you can go to a game and you can see people being into it.
Mm-hmm.
And that even looks different depending on the person. So like, one person might be super demonstrative and like visual. And so it's not, it's not like we're saying everybody has to be as visually demonstrative as like the most expressive person, but all of us should be at whatever our most expressive is, or whatever our most enthusiastic level is. And oftentimes we're not there, and we fall into the trap of not even allowing the words that we're singing to inform what's on our face or what we're thinking, like just kind of disconnected, going through the motions.
Yeah.
And that's hard. And that's especially hard, for anything that's familiar.
Yeah.
Familiar songs.
Sure.
It's a real challenge. And so that is helpful. And when I think about us worshiping in our auditorium at Graymere, of course you've got the A-frame, but there's a lot of space up there.
Yeah.
Right. So sometimes it's hard to hear each other just because the sound's going straight up. And so if we really want to encourage each other, that's another motivation for us to say, hey, I'm going to have to be loud so they can hear me,
And maybe illustratively, man, if we started thinking about how our sound is going straight up, I mean,
that's
maybe that's something to think about, that, hey, what we are doing in this place is going straight to God. And maybe that would change how we approach worship from time to time, and the energy that we pour out.
Oh yeah. You saying that kind of reminded me of what always happens during our Tuesday, Thursday school programs, which are always fun to watch.
Oh, yeah.
And it was such a great job. But you have the kids all up there, and of course every parent is watching the way their kid reacts and responds, and I'm not saying there's an exact parallel there, but it's interesting to me that we have that kind of focus on watching the children that we love. And when we think about worshiping and God is in the audience, we're encouraging each other, but there's that vertical aspect of it that's huge. And just the idea of, as I watch my child, and no matter how much I love my child or how overwhelmed I can feel with emotion of love for my child, that's a reflection of what God has shown us in his love. And so when we're singing, what does that do to our own perspective?
Yeah.
When we think about a loving God, not watching us, for the express purpose of, I want to catch you doing something wrong during that song, or catch you in a wrong note or something like that. But because he loves us, and then wouldn't that motivate us to want to sing even louder? One of the things you mentioned too, the differences between faster songs and slower songs. A few years ago, I really started thinking for the first time, and at least for me, other people have been thinking about it for a lot of years, but how many of the Psalms are lament songs, and how many of our songs are positive and upbeat? Depending on how you categorize the Psalms, you could go almost 50-50 with
Right.
laments and praise. But if you flip through our songbook, it would be 50-50. It'd
Right.
be, I don't know what the number would be, So I thought it might be interesting from your perspective as you are thinking about different parts of worship, whether it's the Lord's Supper or whether it's a specific topic. What do you think of in terms of trying to plug in those more contemplative songs? What goes through your mind?
Man, I love those songs. And I think what's interesting about our contemporary songbooks is that there are probably songs that ought to be a little slower and contemplative, talking about the sacrifice of Jesus, that may be a little too upbeat and happy, happy, joy, joy. And so I'll just tell you there might be some of those that I try to stay away from at times. I'm not going to name any because I don't want to, but there is a place for all of those songs, to be used in our worship at some point, whether it's the Lord's Supper or maybe even topics that you'll be preaching on. At some point, there's going to be an opportunity for us to plug those in. When we get closer, the way we set up our worship that's usually closest to Christmas, and we walk through the life of Jesus, you've got such a different feel of songs, and some of the songs in his birth are upbeat, and this is, the gift that God has given the world. But then there's also, a sense of, man, that gift to the world was confined to a barn and had to sleep in a manger, and so those aren't always the most upbeat songs. Obviously you get to his life, and there are moments that he experiences victory in life, but there's also moments where he's rejected, and, so you've got that kind of going on. In one moment, you can be singing about the death and the burial and him being put in the tomb and hanging on the cross and everything, all the imagery that goes with that. And the next moment, he's rose from the grave. And so I guess to answer your question, all of that is, I want to be as fair to all of the songs that I personally know, and try to plug in as much of those as possible, but also understand, what's going on as we move through worship, and then what's, what are the emotions that we're going to be experiencing as we move through that. I don't know if that answered your question clearly.
It's just the appreciation, I think, sometimes can get overlooked for some of those more contemplative lament psalms. And I think a lot of times our appreciation for those comes when we go through those difficult moments. And so a song like Be With Me, Lord, maybe it means something a little different when you start singing some of the lines of that song, like when loneliness overtakes me, or I must weep amid the fires of pain. Well, when you go through the grieving process, now you can kind of connect with that more. I mean, I know I connect with that song more now than I would have as a teenager. Because your life experience connects you to those things.
Well, I'll give you another, for instance, God's Family is a song that honestly you wouldn't really think of as more of a contemplative. And I think, was it a couple weeks ago, I remember leading the first verse for a specific lead into your sermon. But as I had read through it, I was looking at verses 2 and 3, and those are can be tough verses to sing and to read through, because they are very specifically talking about those who have gone on before us, those that we have lost. And so, oh man, God's family, and we're united, and you kind of get fired up singing it. It's a little, more beautiful, melancholy type song, but it's still one of those that's uplifting. But then, man, how hard does it get when you start thinking about the people that you've lost? Now, obviously, verse 3 talks about we'll be together one day, but that's hard. And yet, there's places for all of those songs in our worship services. And I think
too, we probably all have certain songs that are our favorite songs, but we also all have certain songs that we respond maybe more emotionally to.
Yeah.
And I know it was something I had to think about when I was leading singing regularly, because sometimes you would lead a song and you could see someone who would get emotional or even talk with you about it afterwards. I always get emotional in that song. And you realize the power not only of the songs, but of the words and of the connections with life circumstances. And it just, at least for me, it just increases my appreciation for how sacred, how serious,
Yeah.
how set apart that worship time is. We're singing about real things. You're like really big concepts and big ideas and things that have shaped and molded people's lives. And if we're singing a song that someone remembers from a funeral, they're connecting the weight of those words to that moment. It's just a good reminder for us how serious that whole process is. And anything we do over and over again, we can forget how serious it is.
Yeah.
And so that's, I think, a helpful reminder for us. And I know there are some times, because I'm the one usually telling you the theme for the sermon, I know there are going to be times where if a sermon is going to be about heaven, it's going to be a lot easier to pick out songs. If we did our question and answer series on Sunday nights, and the Sunday night song leaders who would contact me, I always felt bad because I was like, well, we're talking about how Christians handle the holidays.
Yeah.
There's not really anything, not a section in the book you can say, all right, here are those songs. And so it's not always going to be easy to chart out step by step throughout. But even in the midst of that, finding ways to say, okay, maybe there's no song that's about this subject, but what can get us in the mood to study this? What can put us in a mindset of doing that, which is so important. What, just kind of one last parting thought, thinking about what would you want to remind people? What do you like to remind people as you're leading singing? I mean, you get to see all of us. We're all down there. You're getting a bird's eye view of us. But what would be some words of encouragement with you?
Man, I cannot remember the guy's name, but I read a study several years ago that was sent to me that I would want all of us as adults to be challenged by and to think about the next time we worship. The study was specific to fathers, but I think it goes to, we could broaden it to all adults in our churches. But that fathers who are willing to sing out in a way that their children hear them in worship, it is an exponential increase in the likelihood that those children will grow up to be faithful Christian adults. I need to go back and find that again, and I don't remember the guy's name, professor, doctor somewhere up northeast, but that has stuck with me, just that statement in of itself. As a dad, that if I'm willing to sing out, then my theory behind it is, then that means that I really am into the worship with all of my heart. I don't care who else is hearing me. And, I think some of the times we reserve maybe some of our voices or our emotion because we're not comfortable in the way we think we sound or whatever. But I'm going to tell you, I have never stood in the front of a church or any body of believers leading singing and thought, man, we sound horrible today.
Right.
Except for the moments when nobody's really singing. Yeah. When everybody's singing, nobody can hear individual voices. It is just a beautiful offering of praise to God. And so my challenge would be to all of us as adults, fathers, mothers, grandparents, aunts, uncles, friends, mentors, whatever it is. Man, if we want our children, if we want to be passing along our faith in the most effective way, and we want our children to grow up to be faithful Christian adults, they need to see that we really are serious about it in our worship. I mean, that is, take away Monday through Saturday, but if we can't even show how serious we are in our worship on a Sunday, the Lord's Day. That is the moment that belongs to Him above all others. Then they're going to have a hard time really believing us when we say, well, you need to be a faithful Christian. Well, you need to believe in Jesus, because in the back of their mind, maybe they're thinking, do you?
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
that's challenging. It's kind of sobering. But we're not only singing to God, but Ephesians 5 and Colossians 3, we're speaking to one another.
Yeah.
And people are paying attention as to whether or not we really believe in the God that we say we believe in, to the point of giving everything we are in our hearts and our minds and our souls.
That's an awesome reminder. And I love, just from the parenting perspective, I love that reminder that when you're singing, even when children are young from an early age, they're able to tell what matters and what you're investing in. So hopefully that's been an encouraging conversation for us as we think about praise. We've got some conversations planned that will help us delve into different aspects of worship. And so I hope that'll be a blessing to you. Thank you for making the time to join us here. I probably need to be learning how, as someone doing a podcast, to say all of the things you're supposed to do, like things or subscribe to things. But we would encourage you to share this with people. It could be a good way just to get a spiritual conversation going. You just say, hey, check this out. Let me know what you think. If you're in the Murray County area and you don't have a church home, we'd love for you to worship with us at Graymere. You'll always find a warm welcome here from our church family. And we hope that all of us can be encouraged to grow spiritually. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you for being part of Connections. We hope it was an encouragement to you. If you live in the Columbia area and don't have a church home, we would love for you to worship with us. You can find out information about meeting times, classes, and what to expect at graymere.com. You will always receive a warm welcome from the Graymere Church of Christ.